r/AskReddit, mariners of Reddit. What's the strangest thing you've seen out on the open ocean? Serious? I have only spent about 2 months on the water, with about 2 weeks on the Great Lakes. But even just a couple miles offshore in the Atlantic when it's a foggy and calm night, I totally get what sailors talk about when they say sailing off the edge. Sometimes it looks like the water just stops and there's nothing after it. Strange lights in the sky and water. Usually it's just a shooting star or some sort of bioluminescent sea creature. Father used to sail yachts for rich bastards across the Atlantic so they could have it in their Mediterranean and Florida houses depending on the time of year. His first time he got to truly see an open, unmolested starry night, and says he was appalled that it was so unusual to him. And because we're all living in cities, everyone's missing out on that kind of natural beauty that almost every other human in history would have had access to. One time on the coast I saw a massive storm stretching as far as you could see, which is of course very far when you have nothing obstructing your view. There was lightning everywhere. I can't put it into words. Every city was probably getting a lightning strike per minute. But from my point of view with this massive panoramic view, there must have been 10 bolts of lightning per second, sustained over at least an hour. Absolutely mesmerizing. Like any good mariner, I grabbed my cigarettes and did the old 1 foot on the railing and watched an owl 300 miles offshore. I hoped it would stay with us or get close enough to catch, but it flew off into open water. Lots of land birds get stuck at sea. Sometimes they accidentally fall asleep on a ship and wake up in the middle of the ocean and try to find land again. Some get blown out from storms. They eventually drink too much salt water and die. The smaller ones get eaten by seagulls. It's sad. The green flash. I was a photographer on a cruise ship. Can't remember what caused it, but I assume it is predictable because I was invited up onto the bridge to watch it. Whales doing ballet in the bay. Hilarious to watch such a massive and heavy beast come flying out of the water over and over again like it's just playing. Meanwhile it's big enough to just crush me instantly. We were at least 5 days away from land and our ship was covered bow to stern in praying mantis. Not truly the weirdest thing ever, but after not seeing much life for a few weeks it was an experience for sure. In Slovenia, whilst on our research vessel, we saw a pale and bold thing almost emerge from the sea. It looked incredibly humanoid, as in its head was poking above sea level, with a thin layer of water over its head. It was there for a split second, and we assumed it was a diver trying to scare us. Lo and behold, we carried out a biodiversity assessment in that very area and found nothing apart from some smaller fish, but no man. To this day, me and my marine biology professors have no idea what it was and how it got there. I was majoring in marine biology at the time. We named this species as Baldusmanius. Not on the ocean, but whirlpools and drains in the middle of lakes absolutely terrify me. There's something about them that are so foreboding and menacingly. I was on the helms just before period of darkness when one of the stars expanded from a dot to a flower-shaped orange thing that rotated very slowly. That thing was there for the whole night. Probably an astronomical phenomenon. Update. I realize that many people, myself included, are curious about the orange thing I saw. I don't believe in alien spaceships. Still sticking to the theory of astronomical phenomenon. I googled orange light and sky. This is the closest thing that I found. Imagine that. But rotating very slowly. Rotation aside, it has no vertical horizon motion. I know the blog page says UFO LOL, but I am just trying to show a depiction. Perhaps the image could ring a bell in someone's head. A waterspout, or an uncharted sandbar in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Other than that, derelict vessels are a little eerie, and pirate boat smugglers are just kind of meh. Edit. I just remembered. One time off the coast of FL one night I was driving parallel to the coast headed south about 50 miles out to sea. I looked right and saw the shoreline clear as a bell. Almost simultaneously someone topside got a text message. You can only see about 15 miles to the horizon from my pilot house, and cell reception is about the same. So needless to say I got that sinking feeling that there was some egregious error with the GPS and that we were standing into danger. I freaked out and started trying everything I could, from checking radar to see if it was picking up land. It was at 50 nm, to verifying photometer readings against charted depth to dead reckoning the last 24 hours of course and speed changes. Turned out we were where the GPS thought we were. There was just some refractive duckery going on. I also had visual and radar paint on some vessels in excess of 40 miles, which is also theoretically impossible. It doesn't sound that bad, but it was pretty frantic. Driving through the ocean and suddenly unsure you're in safe water because the atmosphere is bending the light wrong. My family traveled transatlantic in 1957 on a steamship, the USS Constitution. When I was 7, the ship sailed fairly close to the Kaplan House, which was a submarine, underwater, volcano that erupted from the fall of 1957 to the spring of 1958. It is in the Azores off the coast of Portugal or thereabouts. The ship's captain came as close as he dared and we all came out on the deck to watch. From where we were it looked like the volcano was floating on the ocean surface. They told me that the volcano was creating an island, and as crazy as that sounds, it turns out to be true. On the 27th of September, beginning at about 6:45 in the morning, a submarine eruption, 300 meters from Ponta dos Capelinhas, 100 m from the Isle Reis dos Capelinhas, began. Whale spotters at Castado de No, a few meters above the Capelinhas lighthouse, saw the ocean churning to the west and alerted the lighthouse keepers. On the 5th of October, the clouds of clay likely rose about 1 kilometer in height and solid fragments, reaching an area of 1,200 meters around. 1. The buildings in the area began to experience the first damages. Windows were broken. Tiles fell from the roofs. By the next day, the first ash fall began on land. In a few hours a black mat covered the extreme west of Island 1, reaching 2.5 kilometers from the crater, necessitating the evacuation of the settlements of Norte Pequeno and Canto 1. Initially, gases and pyroclastic explosions persisted until the 13th of October, while gradually diminishing, but were rapidly replaced by violent explosions, lava bombs, ash and lava streaming into the sea. This intense eruption occurred until the end of October with constant ash raining on fire, destroying cultural lands, inhibiting normal farming and forcing the residents from local villages to evacuate. By the 10th of October, the eruption had initially formed a small island, baptized Isle Hanover English, the new island, Isla dos Capelinhas English, Island of Capelinhas, or Isla do Espírito Santo English, Island of the Holy Spirit, by the locals, 600 meter diameter and 30 meter height with an open crater to the sea. By the 29th of October, the island grew to 99 meters high and 800 meters in diameter of coarse black ash. We crossed that ocean 3 times in the 1950s, but that was the most interesting thing we saw. Well, that, and the man in a boat that had been damaged by the storm we just gone through. His mast was broken and he was adrift. It took hours and hours for the captain to maneuver the ship close enough that we could board the man safely. He came aboard, very thin and wrapped in a blanket. Lucky to be alive and for us to have such a good captain. Dolphins taking turns surfing in waves behind my sailboat at night. I could clearly see the phosphorescent trail of them surfing down the wave and going between my rudder and keel. More than 20 individuals with the most amazing trails through the water. Went on a trip from Hull to the Netherlands on a fat yacht several years ago. I was doing the sailing, not being sailed. I am not a Ponce DW. OFC. The North Sea is known for its oil gas. What I found strange and almost creepy was the sheer amount of mostly abandoned oil rigs, just scattered about, some relatively close together as well. I remember being able to see roughly 13 of them around us at one point. Edit. This was almost a decade ago now I think about it. The situation's probably worse now. Physically seeing a ship and confirming it on radio, talking to the captain, then 10 seconds later, looking up and it's gone. Do a radio check, and nobody knows the call sign or what ship I allegedly talked to. Also, we got caught on the edge of a tropical storm and I was observing it with binoculars while my uncle and grandfather dropped the last crab cages. Water tornadoes, sea devils, are ducking scary. Edit. Stuff added. Both events experienced on my uncle's fishing boat. Solo night watch on a sailboat delivery. New moon with overcast skies. The strangeness wasn't what I could see but rather what I couldn't. Total silence on a broad reach. Surfing down long unbroken swells. No light in the sky. Almost no perceived movement. Just 4 hours of nothingness. Occasionally a wavelet would crest and reflect the light of the navigation light and cast a pale green flash that was the only reminder that I was on the ocean and not cast into an endless void. It was the most unsettling experience I've ever had. My dad and I used to go boating in the Gulf of Mexico to go fishing. We were way out when my dad caught a rope. He pulled it for seemingly ever until we found a wooden box on one end. The box was a trap filled with stone crabs, normal enough, but we couldn't find another end of the rope. The trap was very worn, and the crabs seemed to be newly caught. I live in Michigan and we have the Great Lakes. These lakes contain huge shipwrecks and fish so big that people can't believe they aren't from the ocean. Lake Michigan freezes in the winter near the beach to where people can climb the ice, but it freezes in weird ways. It looks like giant frozen waves and small ice caves. Sometimes ice spheres form as the winter starts and thousands of ice balls just wash up on the beach. There are countless real horror stories and just as many ghost stories about the lakes. The strangest thing I've personally seen, I believe, is that giant ice wave effect and people swimming in freezing temperatures. I've seen massive ships visit from the ocean that make you sit there in awe at how deep these lakes must be for those to function here. Many people die and go missing in Lake Michigan every year. There are unpredictable currents that can pull people under, and most people here are taught how to best deal with these situations, but it still can pull you out into extremely deep waters where it is likely you cannot get enough energy to make it back to shore. Whoa, I might win this one. I was doing drug patrolling operations and some smugglers had tried to sink their boat when we showed up, but it had too many bales of cocaine to sink. We arrested the smugglers and then shot the boat, but the bullets would only penetrate a few feet into the bales. This thing wouldn't sink. A bunch of whales were curious about what was going on, so we stopped shooting at the boat because we didn't want to harm them at all. We rammed the boat at slow speed with our ship and it broke in half and sunk. Except for the bales of cocaine, which have bullet holes in them, and now the whales are playing with them. And I had to go down in a boat and get the bales of cocaine away from the whales, who were now enjoying themselves a lot more than they were a couple hours ago. That was a long day. TLDR, whales on cocaine. Was motoring through Hurricane Irene, captaining a 32-foot charter catamaran between Anegada and Jost Van Dyke in open water many miles from any coast harbor, and stumbled upon a local man with no boat doing deep sea spearfishing. Dude had a 4x 1.5 foot Rubbermaid container attached to two bowies filled to the brim with ice and fish. Probably at least 300 pounds of deep sea catches, before gutting. And all he had was a rudimentary, blacksmithed, iron spear rigged with silicone tubing on a stick for the propulsion. Why the F are you spearfishing in the open ocean during a hurricane? And how the F did you spear all those, you wizard? We scooped him up, gave him a ride, and then enjoyed an enormous bounty of fresh deep sea fish with the fellow. He must have given us 20-25 pounds of his catch when we scooped him and gave him a ride to Jost Van Dyke. Saw the dude later on, getting off his dinghy at Pusser's Bar with plenty of fresh catches for the tourists. Dude was chill, poured us some of his homebrew rum and open fire grilled us some local chicken. Was bomb F, never learned his name. I was on holiday and fishing with my GF in a little rowing boat that we had rented, with a motor, in a remote area on a fjord in Norway. We were about 400 meters offshore when a fog started to develop around us. After a few minutes it was so thick we could only see a few meters around us. The water had become mirror flat, and it was so quiet I could almost hear my heart beating. We sat in the boat and talked about how strange it was and snapped a couple of selfies before firing up the motor to try to slowly navigate out of the fog. My GF was getting a bit scared at this point, and so was I. Even though the boat engine was on and in gear, the boat wasn't moving. I tilted the engine slightly up and saw that the propeller indeed spinning, so I lowered it again and gave it some gas. We still weren't moving. GF dropped a piece of paper in the water and I gave it more gas. Nothing. We just weren't moving. The water was dead still. The fog almost seemed to pulse around us, and it was eerily silent. GF started to bawl and I was freaking out when suddenly it felt like a giant foot kicked at the back of the boat, shoving us forward. The boat surged out of the fog back into the fjord, and the fog dissipated behind us in a matter of a few seconds. The propeller had taken hold and we headed back to the dock. Now this was odd, but not as odd as what awaited us when we got back to the hut we had rented. The owner of the boat was waiting for us and said he was taking the boat back immediately because of some booking problem. He gave us back twice the money we had rented it for, and then said he had to leave, so we headed back to the boat together to get our stuff. As we were walking, my GF mentioned he fog. He said yes, we know about it. We pushed him further on the subject, but he got a bit angry and said just get your things. It was bizarre. Back at the hut we noticed the selfies we had taken were just white. There was zero EXIF data on them on both phones, and oddly, both of our phones were 100% charged. This in itself was odd as it was mid-afternoon and my S7 usually had about 40% remaining because of battery degradation. Anyway, that's my weird experience. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.